and welcome to Dairy Digressions, the podcast of the American Dairy Science Association that takes you behind the scenes of the top labs and minds in dairy research. I'm Matt Lucy, former editor-in-chief of the Journal of Dairy Science and JDS Communications, and fellow of the American Dairy Science Association. I will be your host as we unravel new and exciting studies and get exclusive tips and advice from leaders in dairy foods and production. Share your thoughts with us at adsa@adsa.org. And if you love what you hear, support us by liking, subscribing, and rating us on whatever platform you're listening on. And spread the word to a friend or colleague. Today, it is a tremendous honor. Is that the right word, Jess? I don't know what to say here. I don't know. I'm tremendously excited to have Dr. Jess McArt from the Department of Medicine and Diagnostic Sciences at Cornell University, Associate Professor and Department Chair. Are you a full professor now or still associate, or what's the story?
I'm still an associate professor, Matt. I'll get there someday.
You'll get there. Still hanging out with the professors. You're associating with them, right? Yeah.
I'm associating with them.
Yeah, I remember when I was going through the ranks, my mom would say, what are you, an assistant professor? And I would be like, I help the professors, Mom. Don't worry about it. Okay, it takes time. So you're DVM, PhD, board certified in dairy practice, lots of little letters after your name. Tremendous to have you. Thank you for agreeing to be on, Jess.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited for this.
Yeah, it's going to be fantastic. You're coming to us, for some reason you decided to get out of the central New York weather and for a full year, and you're down in Melbourne, Australia on sabbatical. Fair enough.
I am.
And what university?
I'm enjoying February and sun and no snow this year.
No snow this year. I saw though, Jess, I was stalking you on X. A 5K swim the other day? Are you kidding me? 5K?
I did. Yeah.
You know it's dangerous out there, right? You know it's dangerous. Those are shark-infested waters.
You just have to have somebody near you who's a little bit slower than you, and it's fine.
It's fine, right? Yeah. So that is fantastic. And was that a wetsuit thing? Was it cold water or warm weather or what?
It's I did wear a wetsuit for that one, but lately I've been swimming without a wetsuit. Water's about 20, 22 Celsius, so not bad.
Yeah, not bad at all. Yeah. So but we're going to stick to the script here, but and we're going to ask you about that sabbatical, but we're not going to ask you about that sabbatical just yet. And so we are going to talk to you about a lot of stuff. One of the reasons we have you on is you're the new editor-in-chief of JDS Communications. And thank you very much for accepting our invitation to take on that job. I'm not exactly sure how you're going to be able to do that job and also wrangle as department head at Cornell, but whatever. Okay, you're going to get it done, right, Jess?
I am. I'm up for the challenge. It's fun.
Yes. So and I thought it was interesting, you wrote, I was reading some of your notes, and for you readers that aren't reading JDS Communications, you need to read JDS Communications, and you need to read the note that Jess wrote as incoming editor-in-chief, because it explains a little bit about her background and sort of her motivation. And there's a lot of mysteries to this individual, Jess McArt. I think this is serious mystery going on here. Grew up in Anchorage, Alaska, home of a sum total of 200 dairy cows or something. How many cows in Anchorage?
Well, there's no cows in Anchorage anymore, but in Fairbanks, which is about a 7-hour drive, there's one dairy.
There's one dairy, and you wrote in this thing that you got to know that dairy and kind of fell in love with dairy cows while you were there. And you must have went to Anchorage High School or something. Is there a high school there?
Well, I actually met cows when I was an undergrad. I never had been on a dairy in Alaska and had never really had any agriculture experience in Alaska.
Okay, so but you must have been, so you mentioned in your so we're kind of going through your bio here. You mentioned in your what you wrote here that you were a skier and a cross-country skier, and I sort of like, this, it seems like the smart Alaskans use dog sleds to get around, but you decided you wanted to use your own ATP, okay, for whatever reason, okay. You didn't like dogs apparently, so that's how you got into large animal medicine as well. Is this what it's about? I mean, aren't you supposed to have like a sled dog team, Jess, to get around in Alaska? Not true?
I've actually never been dog mushing.
Oh my goodness gracious.
Yeah, I
Never.
prefer self-powered means.
Okay, so that's great. So you're up there in Alaska, right? And you're like, I don't know, a junior in high school, and you're like, okay, mom, mom, I'm gonna go to college somewhere else, right? And so you break her heart right away, what's wrong with the local colleges? And you decide to go to Dartmouth, right? Where in the
I
why?
went,
What Dartmouth? You like colleges that begin with a D, or how did you come up with Dartmouth?
if, there's a very small number of colleges in the US that have Division I cross-country ski programs. And I wanted to do that and get a good education. So I decided to head to the East Coast and I toured a bunch of colleges there. And I just really liked Dartmouth. It's a small school, literally in the middle of nowhere. And fortunately, there were lots of cows around at the time, which was good for my future experience.
So you were like, I don't think they would have had a dairy there. There wasn't probably an animal science department there. So you just got familiarized with cows based on the local dairy scene. And this is New Hampshire, right? Dartmouth's in New Hampshire.
Yeah, it's in New Hampshire, right on the New Hampshire-Vermont border.
Yeah, yeah. And so you were skiing for them. And we were talking about that the other day, the distances you'd ski. So college, there's probably a 5 and a 10K and a relay or something like that, or how does that work?
Yeah, we did 5 and 15Ks and then usually about 5K relays. And then for funsies, you'd enter events that were up to 50K kind of marathon skis.
Yeah, yeah, no problem, right? Now you got to find 50K of decent snow to get around probably in the
Right.
Northeast right now. I mean, we were Jess and I were reminiscing. I'm a Syracuse, New York, grew up in Baldwinsville, New York, and if you don't know the place, you need to know the Beeville Bees. Okay, they're just phenomenal, and I was looking at some of the data on global warming, and as you know, we got a big series coming out. We'll by the time this one comes out, we'll just have published a podcast with Frank Mittler about global warming, and there's been a lot published on 2024 being the warmest year on record. And I was looking at some of the data, and kind of this whole upswing in global temperatures kind of started in my lifespan, and so I'm not that crazy that I definitely recall consistent snow cover in Syracuse and Baldwinsville, from consistent snow cover from, kind of around Christmas through January, February, March. I mean, consistent snow cover. And we used to ski. My mother's a Norwegian, so, you got to cross country ski, and it just seems like it's not like that anymore, sort of on again, off again. So you're going to have to head north, okay? Way north to get to ski, right? Fair
There's
enough.
also a lot of snowmaking equipment now, even for cross-country facilities.
So you can get it done then.
You just do a loop a lot of times. We call them gerbil loops sometimes.
Gerbil loops. That is phenomenal. So anyway, so then you went to Cornell Vet Med, and so was that always the plan, or did you want to be an MD, or why did you go to veterinary school? Was that always the plan, or what was the plan?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't always the plan. I in undergrad really enjoyed research, and I worked in a biomedical engineering lab. And I realized while I was in the lab that I did not enjoy being inside in a lab all
Right.
of the time. I'd watch my friends run by through the little window in the lab and be like, well, this is really sad that I'm in here,
Yeah.
washing dishes.
Right. Fair
And
enough.
so then I took my MCATs because a lot of my friends were hoping to go to med school. And I volunteered in a large regional hospital that's near Dartmouth. And I just didn't enjoy it. It was not the right place for me. So I went to dinner one night with family friends who lived in the area, and they had horses, and they recommended I ride with their large animal vet. And I was like, okay, I mean, what do I have to lose, right? When you're whatever in your early 20s, you think you need to quickly know what you want to be when you grow up. So I rode with their large animal vet for a day, Dr. Barbara LeClaire, and by lunchtime, I was totally hooked on that as a profession. And she and her family own a dairy in the area, so I started working on the dairy as well, and that's how I decided to go to vet school.
So then you went to Cornell, and then did you practice before? I know you have a PhD, and I think that was with Daryl Neidham. I'm not 100% sure, but did you practice before that, or did you roll right into the PhD program?
Yeah, I did 2 years of an internship and residency, so almost fully clinical work with a little bit of research, and then went into a PhD program with Daryl Neidham. And the nice thing was that during my PhD program, one day a week, I still did clinical work, so kept up my skills during that time.
And so was that those papers on sort of subclinical? I got to use the right word because I learned, Jess, by reading your work that I'm only that ketosis is a clinical disease, and I'm really not supposed to say subclinical ketosis. That makes no sense, right? I got to say subclinical hyperketonemia. Is that correct? Am I using the right word?
It's funny. For my work as a PhD student, it was on subclinical ketosis, which is really a difficult phrase to say when you're giving a presentation over and over again.
Right.
But we've that terminology has changed to using the term hyperketonemia, which is
Yeah.
encompassing a whole range of ideas. So the more
We're not,
appropriate term is now hyperketonemia.
yeah, we're gonna have to we get everybody trained up, and I was really glad, and we're going to get to your paper. Okay. I'm sorry. We're jumping ahead. All right. But I was really glad in your paper that you said, look, don't say type 1 and type 2 ketosis
Oh,
any longer. And I was so glad because people would use that term. I'm like, what the heck is that? What are you talking about? And so that's gone.
yeah. I
I
hope it's
never learned
gone.
it. What's that?
Good. I'm glad it's gone. Don't just forget about it. It doesn't translate well from people to cows.
So you moved up the ranks at Cornell, and of course you started working as the section editor for the Journal of Dairy Science, and you were in the health behavior and well-being. I think we changed the name of that. I don't know, but anyways, is there a new name for that now? Health behavior and
Health, welfare, and behavior.
oh, we switched it up totally. I
Yeah,
how I can't even get through that.
it's
So
hard to get
the
off your tongue when you've been saying it the other way.
So anyway, so you were, and you were known as an outstanding section editor, and then we sort of tapped in, and to you as a person because of your knowledge and sort of and organizational skills, and sort of unknowingly we sort of tapped into something else, and we the fact that you're fairly unique in as much as according to a recent article in Nature Human Behavior, which was published in March 2023, only 14% of the editors in scientific journals are women, and only 8% are editors in chief, which was interesting to me, and sort of opening up this gigantic can of worms, that not can of worms, but gigantic thing that we can go in a lot of different directions. And so I don't even know where to start, but I'll start with your note that you wrote in JDS Communications, again published in probably the first issue of 2024, and you mentioned that you got involved with the American Dairy Science Association by attending the 2011 annual meeting with your mother and eight-month-old daughter. You
Yeah,
didn't know you weren't supposed to do that, right? You didn't
I,
read the memo? You're not supposed to bring your
I,
kid?
I had never been to an ADSA meeting before, and so I did not know that I would be the only one at the time showing up with a small child.
it's so, and I thought this was great, you know, I thought this was wow. And so this is in your letter, which I just thought was phenomenal. And then if you hadn't had enough, um, in 2012, you decide to go to Phoenix, Arizona in the summer when you're 7 months pregnant. Okay. So this must have been your second child. That's probably your son, for maybe.
I have
Okay.
two girls, so both girls.
Oh, two
Yep.
girls. Okay. So and you know, it's kind of interesting, uh, Jess, because I read constantly. Okay. So, and I love to read Science and Nature, as everybody on this podcast goes. And so here we go. Science Magazine, February 2nd, 2024. Baby in tow. Okay. It's a story about a lady this just came out, okay, this month, bringing her baby to a scientific meeting. Okay. And she traveled on a plane with it was an international meeting, and she's talking about doing this, you know. And I thought it's fascinating. And then in Nature, February 1st, 2024, uh article written by, I can't say her name, her first name's Fernanda. Mothers are a force for radical change in academia. And she's writing about the fact that basically mothers need a fair shake so that they can be mothers and also be scientists. And she brought up the point that she's been really active, this lady, and she brought up the point that she's from Brazil, and one of her fellow mothers got a grant review back that basically said, you might have got this grant funded if you were not pregnant. Okay. And weren't a mother, because that has really affected your productivity. And it's fascinating if you look at now I lost my paper. If you look at the studies of parenthood in academia, and I'm showing a study here by Morgan et al., published in Science Advances in 2021. You can see this trajectory of men and women before there's a child born and after. This is terms of publications and scientific trajectory based on productivity. And then after a child is born, the female side of the equation, you can see this divergence where that side of the equation falls off, you know. And it's real data. It's not made up stuff. So do you have any thoughts on that? I mean, you have children. What I guess you could have foregone that decision for your career, but what was your thinking on that? I'm interested.
Yeah, this is a great topic, Matt, and I could talk all day. But I had both my daughters when I was a grad student, and that was great because I was in a really supportive program, and they worked with me for time off or not time off or whatever I wanted to do. And that in itself was really nice. But I started my first faculty job at Colorado State, and I had a 3-month-old and a 2-year-old in tow. And as you know, in academia, in many universities, when a child is born, the parents can get a 1-year extension on their tenure time clock, should they like it. Well, when you've had children before you start your job, you don't get a extension. And so it was really interesting starting with a 3-month-old and 2-year-old, because that whole first couple of years of my professional life are pretty much a haze, because I wasn't sleeping. If we got through a day, nobody died, like that was a good day. So I think there's a lot of differences even at how we start jobs in that sense. But when we do have children while on faculty, you think about what happened to your productivity during COVID. Were you allowed to continue studies, or did you have to pause? And I think that that's what happens to a lot of women when they take time off after having a child. If you're not able to keep your research trajectory going, it can have profound and prolonged effects. And it's, you know, I know at Cornell, we offer, I think it's not many countries in the world that actually get, you know, real parental leave, but you can get a semester of about 50% reduction in coverage. And a lot of faculty who have research commitments really like that because they can focus and keep their research going while putting off other teaching and other needs, which allows them to stay home if they would like to for longer and not have the negative effect on their research trajectory.
I think one of the things that I think a ton about, and I read a lot about women, and again, I will just say I read a lot about this topic, okay? Because I think I know in animal science, I'm not in the veterinary school, I'm in animal science, but we are probably 90, maybe 85, 90% women in our division who want to become veterinarians. That's their job. So I work mainly with women, okay? I teach graduate endocrinology, and so that's for grad students. And the joke is, it's me and 18 women, okay, literally in graduate school, and that's my class, and so it's not a bunch of guys, it's a bunch of women, and so, and just for another shout out to Nature, in January 18th, decisions caught at the crossroads, early career crossroads, facing challenges including parenthood, mental health, and financial pressures, 4 female researchers navigate the uncertain paths before them. And my point is that, if universities, it's kind of time for radical change, it's kind of time to admit that we have to do something different. And I remember long before we had these discussions, I was like way offended when I read the promotion and tenure rules of the University of Missouri. And it was like, well, if you get pregnant, we'll give you an extra year on your tenure clock. And I thought to myself, who the hell came up with a year? Okay, well, if you want to either make it totally geeky and sciencey, like 9 months plus, I don't know, a standard lactation like for a woman. I mean, at least do that, but don't just make it a year. I mean, that's like a bunch of guys sitting around a room going, hey, what about a year? That sounds about right. Yeah, let's do that, and like, so that drove me crazy. That absolutely drove me crazy. This notion that you have a baby and that's worth a year.
Right. Which children are the gift that keeps on giving. So it's not just a year of time. But I think one of the hard things is, biologically, and many women who want to have children would like to have them, is really overlapping with the first handful of years of your career if you start as an academic. And that in and of itself is a very stressful time. Having children is a very stressful time. And so when you put them together, I think a lot of people just don't enjoy the experience.
I think one of the things that I have 2 children, and they're phenomenal, and I took my children on sabbatical with me as well, and it was phenomenal. And I'm so glad I didn't have the children. My wife had the children, but she birthed the children. But I was always so glad I did that. Okay, I was always glad I did that. It's not a decision everybody wants to make, but I was glad I made that. We made that decision. And I was always inspired about, I was listening to my second, third, fourth favorite podcast, Stem Cell Podcast, 200. You need to listen to the 200th episode of the Stem Cell Podcast, Jess, okay? And they're interviewing Dr. Connie Eves, professor of medical genetics at UBC. She's one of the leaders in leukemia treatment. And she just was like, and so she's an older lady, and she said, about children, and she said, I always want to have, she said, and I'm basically quoting, I always wanted children, and I had 4 of them, and I have 11 grandchildren, and it makes me really happy. And I thought to myself, we need to make sure that there's nothing about the academic experience or the professional experience in general that makes women say, I can't have children because I don't think I can pull it off. You know, we need to make sure that doesn't enter your mind. You know, if you want to have kids, good. If you don't, so be it.
You know,
So
Matt, I think another thing is a long time ago when the tenure system was set up and most faculty were men, it was also a time, at least in the US, where many families had a single spouse who had a job outside the home and the other spouse worked in the home. And so many families now have both working partners. And I think that's another thing is not just the stress and requirements and expectations at work, but it's the fact that you have a lot of home responsibilities as well, regardless of which parent you are. And it just gives an additional necessity of something to juggle.
we need every person who has talent to be who has something to contribute, to be in the workforce at this time. You know, in the days of men only workforces are so long gone. And this is also true in veterinary medicine. So I want to, well, first of all, I want to compliment you on taking over this department at Cornell. I mean, we were talking beforehand, but literally there are so many big hitters in your department at the Department of
Population medicine and diagnostic sciences.
Yeah, that one. Okay, there are so many. But anyway, so but I want to explore something with you very quickly, okay? Because there has just been, you know, oh boy, now NABP, National Association of Bovine Practitioners. What is that?
AABP.
That one. Okay. Drama. Everybody's writing about the lack of large animal practitioners. Okay. And okay, I'm going to give you the narrative and you're going to tell me you're going to tell me why it's wrong.
Okay.
The narrative is, well, there's not enough large animal practitioners because we're graduating all these women and they don't want to go into large animal medicine and blah, blah, blah. That's the narrative. And I was thinking about that narrative, right? Well, first of all, the reason we're probably graduating all these, one of the reasons there's a lot of women in the veterinary classes is the women are very good students, okay? And so they're competitive and they're very good students. And as you know, if you're going to go to veterinary school, you got to be a good student because there's a tremendous amount of information so there's some of that. But is that a fair thing to say? Is that fair as now you're going to have to wear your department chair hat as a female veterinarian? Is that fair to say what I just said, that narrative?
I strongly say no.
Good. I want to hear what you have to say about that. This is Dairy Digression, so you didn't think it was going to be easy, do you?
We can digress all we want. The American Association of Bovine Practitioners has done a lot of survey work and interviews to kind of highlight why we may be having these shortages, or at least how AABP can help prevent them. And one of the things is that we actually have a lot of students who graduate and go into bovine medicine, whether bovine exclusive or mixed animal practice. And one of the difficulties is that we have a very high attrition rate in the first 5 years following graduation. And there's a large number of reasons for that. Some of it are finances. So as you know, vet school is very expensive, and a lot of bovine work happens in more rural areas that economically cannot always sustain what new graduates need to be paid to help start paying off their loans. So that's a financial burden is one of the things. Secondly, we have fewer and fewer students coming from rural backgrounds. And so they may not be as happy for a long time in rural medicine, where they may not be able to find a partner, or their family may be a long way away if they decide to have children and would like other support. Those types of things can be more difficult. And I think when you combine all of that, That's how we have more of an attrition and fewer veterinarians doing kind of rural medicine than we need.
It's it's not unheard of, right? We have issues not only with cow doctors, but people doctors in rural areas, right? And young people don't want to live in it's just too rural for them. They want to live somewhere else, and I think it's interesting. And here at University of Missouri, all the clinicians, there might be a few exceptions, but most of the clinicians taking care of our dairy cows at Missouri are women, and they're outstanding. They're great vets, and
Yeah.
they're really good actually. And I just, I don't know, I'm so proud of them, and the great job that they do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
another big difference is the lifestyle of a large animal veterinarian compared to many small animal veterinarians. Certainly not all, but if you live in a city and you work in a small animal practice, there's often an emergency clinic available. And so you have the option of working daytime hours, not night times, and maybe not weekends. And with rural large animal practice or large animal practice in general, you're almost always in some sort of on-call rotation for nights and weekends. And I'm amazed that, there are many, many people who do this for 30, 40, 50 years and maintain their on-call nights and weekends schedule, because it's a lifestyle.
Yeah, you got to really commit to it, right?
Yep.
It's good thing that those darn cows are so likable because, if they weren't likable, you'd never do it, right?
Yeah. If it wasn't for the clients and the cows, it'd be a hard job.
It'd be a really really heavy lift. Hey, you mentioned in your letter there's a couple things that came out. You mentioned the well, let's first give a shout out to the new ADSA loyalty program in which the American Dairy Science Association, the Journal of Dairy Science, the um, JDS Communications, you and Paul kind of spearheaded it, and of course, but you as editor-in-chief, you're of JDS Communications, you're on board the new loyalty program. And so basically what the JDS and JDSC have is that you get points for reviews, and the scientific reviews are so important. Okay. And I mentioned Sabine Mann, and I mean, I don't even know the lady, but all I know is she always says yes, and she always does a great job reviewing. Thank you, Sabine. You've got hundreds of points already, okay? And if you publish papers as well, you get more points. And ultimately, what these points do is they add up to uh, reduced or completely waived article page charges. So the more you publish with us, the more you review for us, there's actually I don't know, a cash incentive, if nothing else. And so thank you. And that's the new program we're doing. You must be pretty excited about that. You publish a ton with us.
I'm I'm really excited for our authors and reviewers because we have a lot of reviewers who put in a lot of time and in their expertise for this, and I think it's a great way to say thank you as they publish their own works in JDS or JDS Communications.
The one of the things that you bring up in your letter here, I thought it was kind of interesting that you said, in my new role, I hope to foster a sense of belonging within our scientific journal community and engage diverse groups of readers and authors on topics that advance the science of dairy production. Inherent to this process is understanding that our members bring differing experiences and strengths, both scientifically. And I challenge all of us to question assumptions when our thoughts differ from those of others. So did you want to expand on that or talk a little? It's so well written. Maybe you're like, well, what don't you understand, Dr. Lucy? But is there anything?
I spelled it out very clearly, Matt.
Come on, buddy. Would you like to talk about that or in any way, shape, or
Yeah,
form?
I think it's very easy when you're in the same place in the same dairy industry. You kind of mingle in the same general circles to have an understanding of this is how we do things, and this is the best way. And what I really like about, even though it's the American Dairy Science Association, is that it's an international group of scientists. And, anytime I go to an ADSA conference, people from all over the world present things that I haven't thought about, or they've done things differently. And it's so easy to say, oh, well, that won't work, in our dairy system, or you should have done it this way. And that's not necessarily true. And I think it's really important that we highlight voices of people in our organization community who are not necessarily in the majority, because we have so much to learn. And if we don't provide people with that opportunity, we all lose out.
It's really, I think that's great when you say challenge us to questions our assumptions, and so we get sort of imprinted with this mindset, and it's so beneficial to think about that mindset. And hey, I want to ask you about your sabbatical. You're down in Australia. I mean, so you brought your family with you, I know that. And so what are you doing in Australia? What university are you with? I mean, I see lots of pictures of pretty beaches and stuff like that, but I want to know what you're doing down there, all right?
I probably should post some pictures of my computer screen every day just to show that I am doing more than just playing. But yeah, so I have two daughters, 11 and 13, and they're enrolled in schools here and on swim teams and having a great time. And my partner is a bee researcher at Cornell, so he's also on sabbatic, working on a book. And I am stationed with Agriculture Victoria, which is a government organization, and we are the part that I'm in is associated with La Trobe University. And it's the program I'm working in is the Dairy Bio program, which is run within Agriculture Victoria. And so I have known Jenny Price for a while. We've done a little bit of collaborations, and when an opportunity for a sabbatic came up, I asked if I could come hang out with her and her team for the year, and she said yes. So it's been a good amount of learning for a dairy vet to sit in amongst the geneticists and the folks who do molecular genomics and try and understand.
Yeah, Jenny is, of course, Jenny was our very first person on this podcast. She was our beta test, and her episode continues to be very popular. And of course, she's a section editor for JDS Communications, so that's another thing.
Yeah.
Jenny has been just phenomenal, and I think she was an early woman in science, in the dairy science. Maybe that's not fair, but she's been at it for a long time, and so but she's just phenomenal. And we had a question about dairy in the US versus Australia, and so it came from Dave Innes at Guelph. Would love to hear Jess's opinion of the Australian dairy industry and research landscape, and what topics she thinks will be important for young dairy scientists in Australia to think about in the future, and in order for their work to have global impact. So that's a pretty hefty question right there. So Australia versus the United States. Of course, American dairy is better, but okay, is there anything good about Australian dairy? Sorry. Oh my God, did I say that? That's mean. All right. But anyways,
Matt,
just
Matt,
kidding.
we're opening our minds.
Okay, that's right. That's right. You call that a cow? Oh my God, anyways. Okay, so answer his question if you still remember it. Okay, so
Yep.
Go ahead.
It has been really fun to get to understand the Australian dairy system better. I've spent a lot of time in New Zealand, but I have not spent time in Australia before with dairy. So there are about 1.5 million dairy cows in Australia, and there are 8 main kind of milk production regions. And the state of Victoria, where I'm living now in Melbourne, produces about 60 to 65% of the milk in Australia. So a nice cooler climate, we'll say. So the average herd size is around 250, 275 cows. But what's really interesting about Australia is the variation in dairying style. So there are farms that are purely pasture-based. There are that go through the gradations of pasture-based with feed supplementation all the way to in the US what we would call traditional, freestyle herds. So depending where dairies are, certain areas do more of one than the other. So it makes it a little hard on the research side because there are so many cows in each of those groups that some research translates, some doesn't. So I think the interesting thing that I've learned about as far as research with the dairy industry, and this was a lot through speaking with Alan Bell, who is Australian and used to be the department chair of animal science at Cornell. And he mentioned that when, dairy started in Australia and the university systems, it was not set up in the US where we had kind of a land grant institution. And so the universities don't seem as integrated with the extension and research aspect that many US universities are. And that's a big difference because, coming from Cornell and our state of New York system, we really, I think, have a great integration with our New York producers and nutritionists and just understanding what the issues are and helping work through that on the research side. And here it seems a little more separate.
Right.
And so I think and they are, there's lots of groups that get together to talk about things, but that's a big difference between the two systems.
The growing up in New York State, the Cornell brand was so strong. I'm growing up in a little town in New York State, and it was like if it was information coming out of Cornell, it was gold, and it was. I think that's probably still true today. We interviewed Daryl Neidham, who is in your department, a few podcasts ago, and when he talks about the penetration of the Cornell knowledge base into the producer realm, it's phenomenal, and it's something to be very proud of, in Cornell veterinary medicine, to be very very proud of, and it's just something. And so one of the things I wanted to do was I wanted to talk a little bit about your research. And you're very famous for your research, Jess, and I use all your publications in my talks because I talk about postpartum cows and reproduction. And for a long time, I thought there were Daryl Neidham's publications, and then I never looked at the front author. That was you. And of course, you're very famous for your work on hyperketonemia in cows. And I think your work was one of the first, some of the early research you had, that the possibility that there's a long-term impact of elevated blood ketone levels on not just on both production, but also on reproduction. And it was super important. And I was reading your most a paper that you and Sabine wrote on hyperketonemia, a marker of disease, a sign of high-producing dairy cows, or both. And the current landscape is that people are like, well, ketone bodies are normal, and people are saying I need to test for them and treat cows. Well, maybe they don't need to be treated any longer. Can you just explain, in your own mind as an expert, your current sort of landscape of this question about ketone bodies in cows, and what we need to concern ourselves with and what we do not?
Yeah, sure, Matt. I think, in the beginning, to preface this, is that these are high producing cows that have just calved and are going through a ton of, physiological changes. And so, for the first, let's say, month of lactation, nothing is really normal in them because they're getting back to what was normal, right? Happens in postpartum women as well. And so it's really hard when we lump the first month of life or lactation in a cow together, because what happens to her on day 2 is nothing like what's happening on day 28. And when we talk about hyperketemia, production of ketones is a normal physiologic response to high milk production. And it's an important way that the cow, creates a second fuel source. The issue is when those ketones are becoming elevated and how high they become elevated. And, more recent work in the last couple of years, and this kind of first came out from a group, Luciana Caixeta in Minnesota, that they looked at cows that first had elevated ketones 1 week after calving versus cows that had first elevations the second week after calving. And their data for cows with elevated ketones in that first week kind of agreed with everything else, that those cows had worse outcomes, health, production, reproduction. But for cows in the second week, there wasn't anything much different, and they actually produced more milk. And what was interesting with that is it made me go back to my PhD data, where I kind of lumped cows in the first 2 weeks together. So when I separated them out, I found the same thing that they did. And I think there's a lot of things, that we're learning, with hypokalemia or hypocalcemia, that it's kind of when it's elevated or decreased and for how long, that is really telling us what's going on with these cows. And the important thing to remember is that ketones we use as a marker of something abnormal that's going on. And so it's not a causative thing. Just having high ketones isn't causing a cow to get a DA, but it's a marker of some process that is on its way to creating whatever bad thing happens next. And so it's something we can easily measure on farms right now with handheld blood meters. There's a lot of great work coming out on, milk FTIR and what we can measure in milk. And so I think we will soon develop better ways to kind of monitor this normal or abnormal kind of state in these cows.
So what would be, you mentioned in your article, the propylene glycol treatment, which we're all familiar with. So what you're saying is that, okay, first week you need to address that issue if it's going on the first week. Later, maybe leave her alone as long as she seems fine. But what is the prevalence that would be an alarm level for hyperketonemia during the first week? Okay, so you're testing. When do you say, hey, this too many cows with this?
Yeah, so there's good research out of Guelph and Cornell that show, once you get above 25% of your cows with hyperketonemia, that's kind of that herd is going to have worse outcomes at the herd level than other herds. And I think in general, one of the great things about monitoring for ketones is it's a way to look at your transition cow management. So your dry cow nutrition, how are your cows moving through calving, how's the fresh pen, and it's a way to monitor your management and then see if you need to make changes.
I think one of the things that people need to understand is that, and when I was preparing for this interview, I did a lot of reading. I was like, okay, well, what exactly do ketones do to a cow anyways? I mean, what is the causative agent that leads to lower reproduction? And people talk about oocytes and they'll talk about immune system, but what is the real, what is where's the promoter, where is that, and I'm not sure I could ever really, lots of possibilities, but one of the things I thought was really interesting was I was reading the diabetic literature, and of course, handheld ketone meters for cows, they were originally, I think, developed for people with uncontrolled diabetes and ketonemia, whatever that disease, whatever, And I started reading about that, and I started reading about this concept of sort of metabolic memory, where if cells receive an insult, they have a capacity to sort of remember that insult, and it's kind of programmed at the epigenetic level. And I was reading the literature on diabetes in people, And one of the things they noted was that, even after you normalize glucose levels in people with type 1 diabetes, uncontrolled glucose, even after you normalize it, they call it, they use the word metabolic memory or a legacy effect, whereby that disease, even though you've corrected the glucose, the body remembers. And I think that's what people have to understand, well, why do I care about this hyperketonemia in week 1? Well, because cells remember that, and you need to address it. And I think that's a really interesting piece of research going forward. Is we work on inflammatory memory in the uterus and but this metabolic memory, and then not only what it is, but how do you erase it? If this does do damage, if you do have a cow that has elevated blood ketones and it does damage her, you can resolve that with your 5 days of treatment. But then, is there a memory of that? It's interesting,
Right.
isn't it? It's interesting.
It is interesting. And I think that so often we get caught up in, does this treatment reduce blood, BHB concentrations? Does it not? But what we have started to look at, and what's really important in my mind as an epidemiologist, is what does her long-term health look like after those BHB concentrations are elevated? And so it's not necessarily, the concentration triggers you to an action, but there are a lot of treatments we do which lower BHB concentrations, but do absolutely nothing long-term that's helpful. And so thus are probably not good treatments. And so the memory potential makes you, again, even think more upstream in that there are a lot of herds that are really well managed and their cows are comfortable and happy and eating, and they have very few cows that get hyperketonemia. And so there are ways we can deal with this on the upside. That's a lot more important.
Do you I noticed that all of a sudden I'm seeing all this data from you on subclinical hypocalcemia, or that's not even right. Subclinical hypo, is that right? Subclinical, is that the
Yep.
word? Have I used the right word?
Sort of.
Okay,
We've
well,
started to use the word dyscalcemia, but we'll get there.
okay. So, and I see more of that. And you just published a paper on rumination activity and multiparous. You're using dyscalcemia, huh? What the heck is dyscalcemia? That's just, is that a new word? You don't get to have a new word. Is it dyscalcemia?
It's a new word that one of our current grad students, Jackson Seminara, came up with in lab group. He's doing a vet PhD dual degree program, and we've now used it in a number of papers, and people say, do you need this new word? And we've said yes for now. But it's the idea that in early lactation, what happens with cows' calcium concentrations in the first 4 days of milk, kind of similar to ketones, can be a big marker of future production and health. And what we've found is that cows that have low blood calcium at 4 days in milk, whatever their calcium concentrations were before that, it's a really great marker to show that those cows with low blood calcium are associated with poorer reproductive outcomes, more disease, and less milk production going forward.
And in this paper, and this is an article in Press and JDS Communications, and the first author is Seeley and McArt are the authors on this. They're looking at periparturient rumination with and without dyscalcemia. It's quite a marked effect on rumination activity and activity time. I mean, these cows with this periparturient hypocalcemia, that's probably wrong, but anyways, much less rumination and much less active. I mean, it's not a little bit. It's like wow, cows are messed up.
Right. So this is a project that Clara Seeley, who's just started a job as an assistant professor at University of New Hampshire, was her final PhD project, and she wanted to look at ruminations and activity in this well-characterized set of cows. And we were not expecting to find the differences that we did. But what was really interesting in the rumination data is that for the first 5 days, cows that were normal calcemic, we use the term eukαλcemic, had, their ruminations increased very quickly after calving, and these cows were doing well. And the cows with dyscalcemia, or who developed dyscalcemia, their ruminations actually didn't increase on average at all from the day of calving to the next day, like zero minutes. And then it started to increase, and it took a good week for them to reach the other cows. And so it's a, not the best way to diagnose these cows based on the modeling, but it's not bad. But it is a tool that we can likely incorporate with others. But it also tells me that very soon after calving, and probably a little bit before calving, these cows that eventually become dyscalcemic are kind of, their physiology is separating from normal calcemic cows. So we really need to figure out when that's happening and why that's happening.
So as a clinician, okay, when you have a herd that you suspect has too many cows that are subclinically, or I don't know what the right words are dyscalcemic, okay, I guess it's only clinical if they don't get up, right? They've fallen down and can't get up.
Correct.
That's milk fever.
Correct.
I'm doing pretty good, right? Yeah, that's milk fever. Yeah, okay. That's what we learned about when I was at Cornell, but now it's been largely resolved. But do you go to the dry cow pen then when you see these kind of issues? Do you go to the negative decad diets, or where do you go? Where do you start? Okay, I got too many of these cows that are subclinically hypoglycemic. Where do you go?
Yeah, that's a great question, Matt, and that's what we're kind of working through now. And just having been on a lot of dairies that have a lot of calcium data, it's looking at the close-up pen. So 3 weeks before calving, what are they eating? What's the stocking density? How were their intakes? How's their ration formulated? And then a lot of it is even happening the day of calving. So when are these cows getting moved into the calving pen? How stressful is that? How long are they in there? What are they eating when they're in there? So there are a lot of herds that will leave cows in the calving pack for 12 hours after they've calved, and they're still eating dry cow feed, which is not what those cows should be eating. And so, when they get moved into the early lactation pen, how crowded is it? Are the heifers mixed in with the cows? Those types of things, I think, as we work through, can really help increase dry matter intake and probably reduce our prevalence of dyscalcemia.
You also published a paper on now you're calling it subclinical hypocalcemia, so I don't know what to say. JDS Communications, okay. This one was again by Seeley. You got a couple of Seeley publications here. This lady is prolific.
She did a number on her PhD, that's for sure.
Yeah, so she's Association of Subclinical Hypocalcemia at 4 days in milk with reproductive outcomes in multiparous Holstein cows, and you're showing not massive effects, but effects on subsequent time to pregnancy and pregnancy by 150. And so again, these I don't know if it's metabolic memory or whatever, the animal is cured, but they remember, and these things are really fascinating to me. I think it's kind of like it's a new dawn where we think about, okay, how do we reprogram tissues and get them through that? One of the things
we know so much about calves and how important feeding colostrum is to calves and their long-term, life. Yeah. The first couple of weeks of a cow's lactation after she births is also a very, very important time.
Absolutely, right?
So it's a similar idea.
Once you get them going, they'll go, but you got to watch. One of the things I wanted to tell to our listeners now, if you're intrigued by what Jess is saying, let's remind everybody that the Journal of Dairy Science, as well as JDS Communications, is 100% open access. What that means to you as a person is if you want to read Jess's original work, you go to the ADSA or JDS or JDSC website and you just click and you can read that, because that's what open access means. So there are many journals that are behind a paywall, or if you're not from Cornell or Missouri, you can't get at them. But these are we made that decision as an organization that we would be 100% open access. So everything she's talking about, you can find it online. So it's pretty exciting. Hey, are you going to go to the annual meeting this year, Jess? And when is the annual meeting? June, right? Okay. Are you coming?
It's my last 2 weeks of sabbatic, so yes, I am coming.
Oh,
I mean, I'd
fantastic.
come if it was not the last 2 weeks of my sabbatic, but yes, I will be there.
Oh, so that's fantastic. Just to remind everybody, the 2024 ADSA annual meeting is June 16th and 19th, 2024. Abstract submission has passed. I hope you got your abstracts in, Jess.
We did.
Okay, that's
Just under the character count.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, don't you get the 10%? I just email Carrie and just say, hey, give me a few more words here. No, I don't do that. She's hard. She doesn't let you add more characters.
No.
And so so in West Palm Beach, Florida. So I know it's summer there. You're gonna go summer. June 16th and 19th. Let's remember that it's all happening. It's a great meeting. It's a great location. Early registration by March 31st, Jess. Okay. Get your
Get them in.
registration in now. Okay. March 31st. You better write it down because you're on
You know,
sabbatical.
I did look at the price differential between early registration and not early and regular standard registration, and
Yeah.
everybody should register before
You got to become a
the
member,
early date.
right? You got to become a
Yes.
member because that'll reduce your registration. And then you got to register early. Fair enough. And you know what else, Jess? If you work
What's
really
that?
hard, you could become a fellow of the American Dairy Science Association, and then it gets really inexpensive. Okay, so
You know,
there you
you
go.
mentioned that in your intro. I have no idea what a fellow is or how you become one.
You just got to be a guy, first of all, so you're out of luck there. No, just kidding. Just kidding. You're not old enough, okay? You're not old enough, Jess, okay? You just got to be around for so long that they give this thing, and then I got it. I
Do you
don't
wear
know.
special jackets?
No, I don't. I don't know. I don't know how I got to become a fellow. I didn't, they just nominated me and here I am. So anyways, and I don't know what fellow means. I don't know. I'll have to look that up. So is there anything else you want to talk about before we close, Jess? You're so much fun to talk to that we could talk sports forever, okay? Are you any good at swimming? Are you good at it? Or are you just one of those people that, claws at people when they're in the water? Could you really swim?
I was a swimmer in high school. That was one of my two primary sports. So I've reinvigorated myself swimming in the Australian Ocean. So it's been good. And I did not drown in that 5K. So
you're good, huh?
I must be somewhat okay.
Yeah. So then you remember, I don't know if you remember the last Olympics. Remember that swimmer that came out of Anchorage? She was a breaststroker. Remember that lady? It was like
Lydia Jacoby.
Man, she was hardcore. Swimming 50, 20 short course, and then she won off these long course, and I think she got a gold medal or something. It was crazy. Yep. I was really proud of her, so that was cool. Yeah, I swim. I'm a swimmer, and my kids are swimmers, and I still swim a couple days a week. I swim. I love open water swimming. I love when I was on sabbatical in New Zealand. I did a lot of open water ocean swimming. I love that. But you do die.
And Tonio Faciola and I are gonna hit a pool at ADSA, so you're welcome to join us.
Oh man. Okay, we'll do it. We'll check it out. I want to know some times before I get in the pool with you two. I don't want to get beat too bad.
As a bovine vet, swimming is really good for your shoulder health.
Oh, fantastic.
So, yeah. Fewer injuries.
Is there anything else you want to talk about? Because I have a few questions going out. I think I've gone through all my papers on my desk here. Is there any other questions you want to talk? Anything else you want to say?
I think, I have lots of things to say, but I'm ready for more questions.
Okay. So Jess, so this is interesting. So some of these are going to be really hard because you're now you have a very difficult role ahead of you as department chair, but I know the answer to this, so I don't even know why I'm asking it. What's your favorite day at work? What is like, oh, I am really looking forward to going to work today?
That actually is a hard one because what I love most about my job is that no 2 days are the same. So I get my days out on the road doing vet work, and I get to see my clients and the cows with students, and I love it. And I come in for a day and I have meetings with the grad students and we talk research and I love it. And then I have, department meetings and get to do a lot of, foresight and planning. And I enjoy that too. So it's hard to pick a day.
Wow. That's wow. Okay. I figured you'd say, well, I really like it when I kind of put on my boots and head out in the truck. And I don't know. I thought
Yeah,
that would
except,
be like
when it's like -10 and you do that, it's not that much fun.
that was that was fun. The cow's like at the other end of the barn and she's kind of over there, and you're
Yep.
climbing over a snowbank and what
It makes you tough.
what's that?
It makes you tough. It's good.
Yeah. We were talking to Christine Bays, and we were talking about she's a geneticist up in I think she's at yeah. And I said, and we got it. She hasn't come out yet, but we were talking on Dairy Digressions, and we got into talking about the old when the manure spreader froze up or something like that, and her brother used to always make her go deal with the frozen manure spreader. It's like, yeah, that is a rough job. Okay, so any really good science career advice or veterinary career advice that you got that? Okay, so now I'm messing up the question. Any really good science or veterinary career advice that you can give or you got along the way from someone else? Okay, so you can say, or somebody told you, like I don't know what.
One of my dairy clients once told me to never stop asking questions because I do ask a lot of questions, and I appreciated that because one, it meant he didn't mind my asking a lot of questions, but two, it really helps. I think everybody, again, get over what their assumptions are and really think about what's going on. And I guess the other one that I would have is, when you have opportunities to do things or get involved, say yes. So, for example, when I was asked, actually, I think it was you who invited me to be on the editorial board at JDS and then joined as a section editor. I loved that experience. I got to know a ton of people, really expand my, knowledge of people in the dairy community and research. And I would regret not having had that opportunity or saying no now that I know how much I learned and how much fun that was.
Yeah, it's really true, right? I remember when Roger Shanks called me and said, "Would you like to be editor-in-chief of the Journal of Dairy Science?" And I was like, "What? What?
Yeah.
Why me?" Okay. And I said, yes. Thank goodness I said yes, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just fantastic. It's been a fantastic experience. Who's your favorite person out there, living or dead? Your favorite
I don't know if I have
person.
a favorite. I have a favorite person who started me down the path that I'm on, and that's my friend and large animal vet, Dr. Barbara Clare, who got me into veterinary medicine and cows in the first place. So without her, who knows who I would be podcasting with right now.
Yeah. Maybe you'd be like a sports broadcaster for the Winter Olympics. It'd be like
I would do that.
You would do that, right? You'd be good at that,
Yep.
right? If you were not a scientist, what would you be doing? Or scientist or veterinarian? I see. Do you think you're a veterinarian or a scientist?
I'm a veterinary scientist.
There you go. You're on your way. Okay. So if you're not a veterinary scientist, what would you be doing?
I have no idea. I think I also love teaching, and I probably would be very happy being a teacher of something somewhere to people.
Yeah. So this has been fantastic, Jess, and I knew it would be a good interview, and I knew it would be fun, and I knew it would be really fantastic. And I just wanted to say thank you for hanging in there with me and answering all the questions, and I really appreciate your time. Okay, thank you very much for spending time with us.
Thanks for having me.
That brings us to the end of this episode of Dairy Digressions. Please remember to share your thoughts with us at adsa@adsa.org. And if you like what you hear, support us by liking, subscribing, and rate us on whatever platform you're listening on. And spread the word to a friend or colleague. Until the next time, thank you for so much for listening. Bye, everybody.